Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 399, Deceit and Assist. The episode begins with May celebrating the fact that she just advanced to the next round of the contest by going to the Pokemon Center to relax with her friends and her mother and heal up her Pokemon with the help of Nurse Joy, who takes them. It took a while, but May had a while since she had a while to wait until the next round began, and eventually Nurse Joy had returned all of May's Pokemon to her on a Pokeball tray, fully healed up. May thanks Nurse Joy and her Chansey for their help, and although there were other people in line waiting to get their Pokemon healed up as well at the Pokemon Center counter, Brock butted in the way, even in front of May, asking for a checkup from Nurse Joy of his very own. But Nurse Joy simply walked away, clarifying that she didn't do checkups on humans, only Pokemon, massively disappointing Brock as he screamed out in sorrow, and this scream could be heard all throughout the Pokemon Center in Slateport. I guess Max didn't even have to drag Brock away by the ear this time. That was rare. May was still annoyed by Brock's previous behavior, and was about to leave the Pokemon Center, since she had no reason to still be in there. But along the way, she was stopped by none other than Harley. And Harley requests if he and May could practice together for the contest battles, and May agrees, saying that training with a partner would make training easier. Meanwhile, as for Drew, outside of the Pokemon Center, he was currently spraying his Masquerain with a lotion and rubbing Masquerain with it to polish it and make it shinier. He wasn't neglecting his Roselia though, as he was grooming it. However, he soon stopped for a second as he focused his attention towards May, Harley, Caroline, and Brock, who were all passing by, coming out of the Pokemon Center, because apparently Caroline was there too. At first, he noticed that May was super pumped up for her next round, but he soon picked up that she got surprised when he looked over to see Brock reading her the Grand Festival guidebook, and there was something in there that she was surprised by. Well, May was surprised by the fact that according to the guidebook, the contest battles would be at 2-on-2 as opposed to 1-on-1. But she soon became more confident when Brock clarified that the first round was single battles, and the rounds after that were double battles, so she only had to worry about double battles for some of the time. Regardless though, Brock advised May to be very careful who she picks for the double battle, advising that she pick her two Pokemon that were in the best condition. May simply just looked at all her competition, including a trainer with a Clefable and Swampert, and remained confident and excited, promising Brock that she would prepare properly in order to win. Meanwhile, we then see the beach, where several coordinators were training with their Pokemon. Ash was also on the beach as well, practicing with his Snow Run, trying to get it to use Ice Beam yet again, with Pikachu and Max observing. Max was also helping Ash set up some drink cans to shoot down with the Ice Beam, and once these were fully set up, Ash hadn't launched the Ice Beam. But right before Snow Run could actually use the Ice Beam, a small gust of wind blows some dust in its nose, and this causes it to sneeze, and accidentally sneeze an Ice Beam across the entire goddamn beach, because the Ice Beam had more power because of the sneeze, and the Ice Beam happened to be directed not at the targets, but at a nearby Swalot that a trainer was training with. Luckily for the Swalot, its trainer jumps in the way, looking to defend his Swalot. But much to Ash and Max's shock, in the process, his ass got frozen, because he basically stuck his ass end out to save Swalot or some shit. Ash and Max felt bad, so Ash sent out his Torkoal and had to use a flamethrower to thaw his butt out, leading Swalot's trainer to compliment Torkoal and thank it for its help, which makes Torkoal cry tears of happiness. Ash then apologizes for the whole ordeal with Snowrun, but the coordinator just suggests that Ash use Snowrun for the contest round, because that Ice Beam certainly was impressive. Ash simply replied that he couldn't though, because he didn't enter the Grand Festival, he was only cheering for his friend May. And then he and Max introduced themselves to the coordinator, who introduced himself back as Anthony, and he also introduced his Swalot, who Ash used his Pokédex on to learn more about, learning that it was the evolved form of Gulpin. Ash then asks Anthony if he was entering the Grand Festival, and Anthony explained that he was entered in the Holland Grand Festival, like he signed in and everything, but he lost his contest pass and his ribbon case, because after talking with 3 people, he suddenly found that they were missing, and he suggested that those 3 people could have taken his ribbon case and ribbons and contest pass. Hearing this, Ash and Max obviously wanted to help, as they declared they would do everything they could to help Anthony track down the thieves, and Ash looked around at all the coordinators, trying to find suspects, but they were all just playing with their Pokemon, not being suspicious at all. So Max went to go get the help of Officer Jenny of Slateport, who had to be nearby. Anthony was concerned, but Ash assured him that he would get his ribbons back. Meanwhile, it was revealed that Jessie had Anthony's 5 ribbons pinned to her chest, and was very happy to have them, as now she could enter the Grand Festival, and she could win the Grand Festival. Jessie was so happy that she started to dance around, which was annoying Meowth and James immensely, while Wobbuffet just stood there. But Meowth ended up getting more annoyed, as Jessie soon picked him up and did a dance with him, trying to kiss him, claiming that she would still care for him even after she became the super famous top coordinator. James questioned why being a top coordinator was their top priority now, as opposed to stealing, leading Jessie to say that if she became top coordinator, then that would make her a famous celebrity with many perks. And she then went into a fantasy about what all these perks would be, almost choking me out in the process, because she wasn't focusing on him, as she fantasized that she would get to be on magazine covers, set fashion trends, and get a recording contract. And she also imagined herself coming out of a limo, surrounded by paparazzi and fans, and also doing a photo shoot with her sniper. James, however, reminded Jessie that she would only be able to have these things if she won the Grand Festival. And she likely wouldn't be able to win because she didn't have any Pokeblocks, unlike any of the other coordinators. And also, she hadn't even been training for the contest at all. Meowth backed James up, stating that he'd much rather be a non-famous Pokemon, just a normal, simple thief with no pressure whatsoever, to which Jessie shakes Meowth violently in anger, reminding him who was in charge. Her, not Meowth. However, James then reminds Jessie that since she was using a stolen contest pass, if she ended up winning, then the coordinator that she stole the contest pass from's face would appear on the victory screen, and he would become famous rather than her. And James proceeds to enter Jessie's contest pass number in the contest database on a computer that he had. I don't even know where they were. Maybe like their own hotel or some shit. Maybe Anthony's hotel. Who knows? And yeah, he pulled up Anthony on the computer, revealing that Team Rocket was, of course, the ones that had stolen his ribbons and ribbon case and contest pass. Jessie started to panic a little bit, having forgotten about the fact that Anthony's picture would appear instead of hers if she won. Meanwhile, inside the Pokemon Center, or some training place in Slateport, who knows, despite Harley being next to her and having a secret plan to win the next round by observing what May's strategy was going to be, May foolishly trusted Harley and sent out all of her Pokemon in front of him. And May even introduced all of her Pokemon to Harley. Beautyfly then landed on May's head, practicing for how it was going to end a round, potentially. You know, Beautyfly wanted to win basically just as much as May did, so it was determined to show off and get as much training as possible, but May clarified to it that right now she needed to focus on training all the other Pokemon and picking which one was going to fight alongside Beautyfly in the double battle. So she asked Combusken, Bulbasaur, Munchlax, and Skitty which of them wanted to team up with Beautyfly, even just for the first practice round that they were going to do with Harley. With all her Pokemon cheering, being very, very, very excited to perform, with the exception of Munchlax, who simply just slept. He was not excited to train at all. May wanted all of her Pokemon to have the chance to train then, if they all wanted to, so she asked Harley if they could have multiple battles, and if she could alternate Pokemon during every battle, which Harley said was completely fine, so May picked Skitty to go first. Brock questioned why May picked Skitty to go first, stating that she thought that it was Beautyfly's Silverwind that got her this far in the first place, which meant that Skitty usually did its best because of Beautyfly's Silverwind whenever it used Assist, so she thought that the two of them would be good partners. All foolish May. She wasn't even aware of the fact that Harley had agreed to watch all her Pokemon battle, because then he would be prepared for any Pokemon that she actually decided to use in the double battle. Anyways, unbeknownst to both May and Harley, Drew and his Pokemon were watching the match from behind both of them, and listened in on everything they said to each other during the battle as well, and everything just before the battle that they had just talked about. Anyways, the battle between Harley and May then began, with Harley inviting May to make the first move as he sent out his Cacturne. May obliged, having Skitty use Assist, which became Combusken's Fire Spin, pushing Cacturne back a bit. Harley was shocked, but he didn't care that much, as he simply just started to come up with a counter to Fire Spin in his mind, when Skitty then used Assist again, using a Silverwind from Beautyfly this time. Harley started to act all impressed when he saw this, basically gassing May up and complimenting her skills and how, with her Assist, she could use perfect combination attacks with her other Pokemon, literally running over to May in the middle of the battle and grabbing her hands, complimenting the Silverwind. But specifically, the fact that it came from Assist, with Harley stating that Beautyfly using Silverwind and Skitty using Assist could pull off an unbeatable appeal, especially if Skitty ended up using Silverwind and both Pokemon were using Silverwind at the same time, and suggested that May have her Skitty only use Assist. May was unsure though, saying that Assist was too unpredictable to place her faith in entirely. Man, I see she was finally learning from Ash, Brock, and Max. Harley, however, stated that the appeal of Assist in the first place was its unpredictability, and suggested that she at least use it in the next round, with May admitting that it was a good idea, and she officially declared that since the next round was still a 1-on-1, she was going to use Skitty as opposed to Beautyfly. Caroline and Brock, however, advised against this, thinking that using Assist was too risky, period. Drew, still behind them, also thought that Assist was too risky, and Drew also had suspicions that Harley was up to something, calling May an idiot for showing Harley what she was going to use in the next round, but also called Harley an idiot for continuously trying to scam May, and he then walked away with his Roselia and Masquerain. Caroline then picked up Skitty, as May did some training against Harley's Cacturne with her Bulbasaur and Combusken, even though she wasn't planning on using them this next round. Meanwhile, Ash and Anthony were looking for the thieves that had taken Anthony's ribbons together. Even with Pikachu's help, though, Anthony and Ash started to sulk, returning to a spot on the beach because they hadn't been able to find anything related to the theft. Just then, Max came back with Officer Jenny, and Anthony repeated what had happened to Officer Jenny, informing her of the situation, although Max already had. And Jenny then reassured Anthony that even if he couldn't get his ribbons back, he could still compete in the Grand Festival if he reported to the main registration office in the contest hall. However, Anthony was too devastated about losing his contest ribbons to compete. He was just too sad, and he also lost his confidence to compete, since he worked hard to get all the ribbons, and now all that hard work was lost, so he didn't know if he truly deserved to enter the Grand Festival. Max, trying to comfort Anthony, tried to think of a way that they could get his ribbons and contest pass back. When he suddenly realized and informed Anthony that since Anthony's contest pass was also stolen, the thief must have been planning to enter the Grand Festival using the contest pass and the ribbons. So, that meant that if they did participate in the contest, then when Vivian called for Anthony to come out, this person would come out instead, and their picture would show up as Anthony's instead of their own, since they registered using Anthony's data. So, all they had to do was wait out for this person to get called out, and then they could take their spot and get Anthony's ribbons and contest pass back. And there was no way that the thief could rebuke Anthony's claim of them trying to steal his identity, since he would actually look like the person in the picture, not them. And Ash and Anthony got excited and congratulated Max on coming up with such a good idea. Well, Jenny informs Ash and Anthony that the culprit may try to disguise themselves like Anthony to make it less obvious that they were not Anthony. So she advises Ash and Anthony to look around for a person that may resemble Anthony. But she quickly changed her mind and instead advised Ash and Anthony to just come with her to the main stadium in the waiting room just outside of it, so that when the person who looked like Anthony tried to come out on stage, they could intercept him. And Ash and Anthony agreed. With Pikachu coming along as well, Max decided to go into the stands since the rounds were starting soon, and he wanted to get a better view of them. Sure enough, fireworks then emitted from the top of the Slateport Contest Hall, indicating that the first actual round, aside from the preliminaries, were going to begin, the battle rounds, since there were now 64 contenders left. As announced by Vivian, Max, Brock, and Caroline were watching from the stands, while Ash, Anthony, Jenny, and Anthony Swalla were watching from the waiting room hallway, just outside, because you could see the stadium outside. They weren't the only ones watching, though, as the stands were packed to the brim with people, and there were plenty of people watching from home, such as Norman and his gym assistant, Kenny, in addition to Norman Slackoth, Vigoroth, and Slacking. Dr. Abby was watching from her center with her Delcatty. Timmy Grimm was watching with his Dusclops. Kelly was watching with her Grumpig, and Savannah was watching with her Laron and her daughter Sandra. Erica and Joshua from Pacific were watching as well. After seeing everyone who was watching, we go to the actual stadium where Vivian was talking about the Golden Ribbon Cup, the real one, which was the award for the top coordinator of the entire Grand Festival, and it was currently sitting on display to motivate all the current contenders to do their best. Vivian then introduces the panel of judges, which was a bit different from usual. There was still Raul Contesta, Mr. Sukizo, and the local Nurse Joy, but there were also 2 other Nurse Joys as well, to make a total of 5 judges. And after Vivian introduced the judges, she let each of them have a little word of their own with the microphone, with each of them wishing the competitors good luck, and one of the Nurse Joys saying that she had checked in on all of the Pokemon that had been brought to the Pokemon Center from the coordinators, and she already knew that this contest was going to be great, since all the Pokemon were in great condition, and the other 2 Nurse Joys also affirmed this. Brock could barely handle, from the audience, seeing 3 Nurse Joys at the same time, so he literally went insane, declaring his love to them at the top of his lungs, much to the surprise of Carolyn, and the disgust of Max, who pulled Brock back down into his seat, dragging him by the ear, since Brock had stood up. Meanwhile, in the waiting room, we see a whole bunch of coordinators, since there were now less coordinators, so they could all fit in the waiting room, and yeah, we saw a whole bunch of coordinators with their Pokemon, including May and Harley. Harley was talking to May about how he'd been motivated to do everything in his power to win against May, even though they trained together, and he tried to get May to say some more details regarding how she was going to use Skitty and Assist and all that, but May was too busy doing something else, since she was barely even paying attention to what Harley was saying this whole time, since Ash and Officer Jenny and Anthony had come to her per Ash's suggestion to suggest that she help look out for any suspicious people who looked like Anthony and who could have stolen his ribbons and contest pass. Although Harley thought that May might have been looking for her lover Drew, still thinking about the fact that they could have been actually in love with each other, but May informed Harley of the situation with Anthony, and Harley commented that it was terrible that there was dishonesty around them, referring to thieves. Yeah, sure, dishonesty's horrible, right, Harley? I'm sure you know everything about that. Anyways, we then see none other than Jessie, who was with James and Meowth in a Slateport alleyway, and just as Officer Jenny had suspected, Jessie had disguised herself as Anthony so that she could try and fool everyone into thinking that she actually was Anthony. And she planned to reveal her true identity after she had won, since apparently she thought that the people judging the contest wouldn't know any better, because they could have just thought the real Anthony was in a disguise the entire time. However, James and Meowth were not convinced that Jessie's disguise would work, as, she just did not look that much like the real Anthony, but Jessie thought she did, saying she only got a few minor details wrong, and it wouldn't matter, and she proceeded to get ready to go into the contest hall. Speaking of the contest hall, at the contest hall, Vivian was officially declaring it was time for the main rounds of the contest to begin, and they actually weren't starting with battle rounds. They were starting with the main appeals round, which would get the contestants down to a total of 32. And some other rules were that each appeals performance had a 3-minute time limit, and judges could give a maximum of 20 points. So it was out of 100 in total. You could get a total of 100 points. The round then finally begins with a coordinator sending out his Ninetales, jumping up in the air to do so, since you wanted to launch out your Pokemon nicely as well to get more points. And the Ninetales then used a flamethrower for a pretty good performance. Next up was Harley, who sent out his Banette. Surprising Vivian that Cacturn wasn't being used. And we actually don't get to see a Banette Pokedex entry. We actually don't see that for way later on in the series, but just know that Banette was the evolved form of Shuppet, the Pokemon that Max encountered back in that mansion. Not the same Pokemon, but in terms of species, Banette was the evolved form of Shuppet. Anyways, the first thing Harley has his Banette do was make a scary smile and procure an evil laugh, which scared Vivian. And it even scared May as well, making her nervous when she saw it over the screen in the waiting room. Yeah, she didn't even see it in person, and she was terrified. May calms down a little bit though, finding Banette's next move cool, as it used a Will-O-Wisp to spread some rotating blue flames all around it, and then it used a Thunderbolt, which mixes with the Will-O-Wisp to create a cool illusion in the sky, and then the Thunderbolt comes crashing down towards Banette, and even though it was hurt from this attack, it still kept its evil smile, ending the performance, which earned Banette and Harley 89 points. Even as the Thunderbolt crashing down shook the stage and scared the audience. The judges must have liked that or some shit. Harley then went off the stage, while May, who watched the performance, was extremely shocked at the fact that the judges gave that high of a score. As Harley and his Banette exited the stage, several other coordinators then came on stage one after the other, all scoring in the high 70s and 80s. One of these performances also got a 55, but the majority of them right after Harley's were 70s and 80s. There was a Vaporeon, who used a Hydro Pump, a Ledian, who used a Swift, a Sunflora, who used a Vine Whip, an Electrode, who used a massive Thunderbolt, a Lickitung, who just showed its massive-ass tongue, and also an Alakazam, among others. Both May and Drew, who were now standing next to each other in the waiting room, were confident that they could advance to the next round when they did their performances, but they did acknowledge that they would have to put in a lot of effort due to how good all these performances were. Vivian then officially called none other than Anthony to the stage, while the audience cheered, and Officer Jenny, Ash, and the real Anthony watched from the little hallway leading into the stadium, watching for who would come out upon being called so that they could catch the culprit. Sure enough, Jessie came jogging down the hallway into the stadium, making her best impression of a male voice to try and fool the audience. But right before Jessie could actually make it into the stadium, disguised as Anthony, Jenny, Ash, Pikachu, and the real Anthony confronted Jessie, stopping in her path. James and Meowth were down another little hallway that was connected to this one, and they were watching from afar, very shocked to see the appearance of the real Anthony and Ash and Jenny. Upon being accused of being an Anthony imposter, Jessie was shocked and tried to deny that she was an imposter, and tried to force her way through, claiming that she was the real goddamn Anthony, but of course Anthony knew this was a lie, and Jessie knew this deep down as well, and Anthony sent his Swallow back out, and had it used Swallow to swallow up Jessie, no shit, and then he had it use Spit Up to spit her back out, but only after letting Jessie struggle inside Swallow's stomach for a bit, which freaked Ash out. But on the bright side, when Jessie was spit out, she now no longer had her costume, so her true identity was revealed. So therefore, Officer Jenny officially declared that Jessie was under arrest, and was about to put handcuffs on her, while Jessie just put lipstick back on her lips, not being able to have full lipstick because of her disguise, and stated that she would not get fucking arrested, and was going to challenge Officer Jenny by sending out her Seviper to take her out. But before she could do this, Meowth and James suddenly revealed themselves from around the corner and grabbed Jessie and ran away, dragging her with them, even though she didn't want to go, as Meowth and James claimed that they were afraid of prison and didn't want to get arrested, so they just ran the fuck away, much to Jessie's dismay, as she was dragged along. Yeah, that's right, Team Rocket didn't even blast off this episode, they just willingly escaped. Officer Jenny was a bit mad that she couldn't arrest Jessie, but at the end of the day, there was still some good news, because since Anthony's ribbon case and contest pass were inside Jessie's disguise, now that the disguise was on the floor, Anthony could retrieve his contest pass and ribbons, and he proceeded to take the stage like he should have, because, he was called after all, and he began his performance with his Swalot. And the crowd was immediately impressed by Anthony and Swalot's performance, since Swalot immediately started by being in a flat sludge, and then it transformed into its true form by bouncing and stretching itself out by rolling and spinning around. Just then, Ash arrived in the stands by Brock, Max, and Caroline, explaining what had happened with the whole Anthony theft situation, as Swalot then used a sludge bomb and followed it up with Bullet Seed, which made the audience cheer, since the Bullet Seed destroyed the sludge bomb, causing a whole bunch of dust to form, and the dust provided a whole bunch of mystery for the audience. But soon, Swalot then used Swallow to swallow the dust, and once the stage was fully visible again, Vivian, the 5 judges, and the audience were all impressed, and Anthony had earned himself a score of 82. Next up, Vivian officially announced that it was May's turn to come out, and she did, sending out her Skitty, which immediately earned May some applause, as she sent Skitty out while doing a little spin, and Skitty spun in the air before it landed as well, and also, they just found Skitty cute. And Brock, Ash, and Max, and Caroline were hyped up by this immediate applause, thinking May was doing very good, as she then had Skitty start off with a assist, which turned into Silverwind, and Skitty used Silverwind basically as good as Beautifly could have, impressing the audience, as well as Vivian. May then took Harley's advice to only use assist, thinking that it would definitely impress all the judges with the ability to show off essentially an entire team with only one Pokemon, since Skitty could use moves from all of May's team because of assist. And sure enough, Razor Leaf from Bulbasaur, Flamethrower from Combuskin, as well as Fire Spinning from Combuskin, Vine Whip from Bulbasaur, String Shot from Beautyfly, and Whirlwind from Beautyfly all looked absolutely amazing coming from Skitty, impressing the three Nurse Joys and Sukizo immensely, as well as Vivian, and making Harley angry because May was actually getting praise. He expected that May would not get praise, which was why he even suggested May do this in the first place. However, much to Harley's luck, although Sukizo and the three Nurse Joy were amazed by the range of attacks coming from one Pokemon, Raul Contesta was not thrilled about this strategy from May, claiming that May using the same attack over and over, assist, even though it technically resulted in different attacks, was kind of a lazy tactic, and it also didn't show off Skitty's individual appeal. It more so just made Skitty a tool to show off the rest of May's Pokemon. Regardless, May continued to use assist, and one of these assists turned into Solar Beam, which shocked Ash and the gang and Caroline, including May, because none of May's Pokemon knew Solar Beam. However, Brock then notices Munchlax sleeping in Caroline's lap, as Caroline still had been taking care of Munchlax, and he realizes, along with Caroline, that Munchlax could have actually known Solar Beam, just not used it yet. Although May was confused, she quickly got back in the game, ordering Skitty to use another assist, which resulted in a Petal Dance this time, and it did look good. Brock, Max, Ash, and Caroline certainly thought so, along with Vivian, but the downside was that Skitty started to act strange as soon as the Petal Dance cleared, starting to run in circles, almost unconsciously. May was confused, and it took her a bit to realize what the fuck was happening, but she eventually came to the conclusion that Brock had come to the conclusion way sooner, as soon as Skitty used Petal Dance, which was that the Petal Dance was going to make Skitty confused. The only reason why Bulbasaur didn't get confused often was because it was used to using the Petal Dance by now, but Skitty wasn't. Anyways, May and the rest of the gang were terrified, seeing Skitty continue to just do circles, while the audience was laughing at this. But May knew that this wouldn't get her points from the judges, and she stressed, as she had no idea how to get Skitty back to normal, as she didn't want to risk an assist again, because Skitty going around in circles and then using an assist could cause Skitty to potentially hurt itself with its attack. Meanwhile, in the waiting room, Harley was watching this on the screen, and he was extremely happy to see May's disastrous performance, and congratulated himself for being convincing enough to have May fall for another one of his tricks, having remembered that her Bulbasaur from the last contest could use a Petal Dance, and he knew that he could use this to his advantage to try and confuse Skitty when he used assist. However, Drew then confronted Harley, having heard Harley talking to himself about how he tricked May, accusing him of not actually being a true friend of May, and stated that he should actually win fairly instead of tricking his rivals and enemies. Although Harley defended himself, saying his tactics were totally fair, and he had the full right to try and trick May, as it just was another form of increasing the competition between the two of them. Anyways, back on stage, May was kind of conflicted. She knew that assist wasn't working, but she was conflicted on if Harley had purposely tried to trick her into using assist, or if he had good intentions and was just wrong about the judges liking assist. But nonetheless, she decided not to follow Harley's advice to only use assist, knowing it wasn't working, and instead told Skitty to use Double Slap on itself, which knocked itself out of its confusion. Vivian was startled by the sudden Double Slap, while Harley was, as well, horrified that May was no longer going with what he wanted her to do, but Drew was happy that May was finally fighting for herself instead of just taking others' advice. And then May ordered Skitty to end off the performance with a blizzard, jumping really high as it unleashed the attack, and this blizzard eventually created an incredibly tall castle of ice, and Skitty landed right on top of it, causing the crowd to cheer immensely, including Ash, Max, Caroline, and Brock, in addition to Vivian. But May was a little disappointed, as the judges only gave her a 79, and Caroline, Ash, Max, and Brock were disappointed by this as well, doubting if May could advance or not into the next round, and May was worrying about this as well. After May had viewed the score on the screen above her, she returned to the waiting room, meeting up with Drew and Harley, and apologizing to Harley for not following his advice like she promised. Only for Drew to reveal the truth to May, being that Harley knew all along that sticking with assist would end badly for her, and advised her to do so with the intention of making her lose, and basically just wanting to trick her, and saying that Harley had really reached an all-time low. Harley was annoyed at Drew, calling him May's boyfriend again, and at first denying that Drew was telling the truth, but he eventually saw that May believed Drew over him, so he just admitted the truth, saying that all this time he was just leading her on and pretending to be really nice to her, and actually he was just trying to trick her and all that, wanting to be nice to her so he could gain her trust and misuse it. This left May angry as fuck, obviously, and confused as to why Harley would do something so despicable. Although Harley just responded by calling May a fool for trusting him, and explains that he wanted to get revenge on her for defeating him in the Purika City contest, which resulted in May winning the contest. May, however, argued back that it wasn't fair that Harley wanted revenge when he lost fair and square. It's not like May cheated or anything, but Harley just shrugged May off and simply told her that she would lose the Grand Festival, and nudged her, hitting her a little bit before walking away, leaving May even more angry than ever before as she hears Harley stomp out of the waiting room, not wanting to be by May anymore, smirking at the fact that he believed that he had basically won against May at this point. Even though Drew disliked Harley, he actually agreed with Harley that May shouldn't have trusted him, and said that she should instead trust in her own heart and do what she knew was right, and trust in all her Pokemon as well. It was basically only her and her Pokemon that should make decisions for what they were going to do in the contest, not anyone else. Drew then goes on and on about how gullible May was, saying that he never would have fallen for Harley's lies, and he wanted to go on and on some more, but then he heard Vivian calling him, as it was now his turn. So he went up, leaving May conflicted now by herself, realizing that Drew was probably right, and she decided to take his advice to heart. Although she questioned if she should take Drew's advice to heart, since at the end of the day, they were still rivals. And she was basically like, look, if I shouldn't take anyone else's advice, then maybe I shouldn't take Drew's advice. Yeah, she was basically left with a lot to think about. But anyways, the reason why it took so long for Drew to get called to the stage was Vivian had decided to save the top 3 from the last round for last, going from 3rd place to 1st place. So Drew, being 3rd place, was called up, and he immediately went up into the stadium and sent out his Masquerade, having it start off with Hidden Power. And the crowd cheered as the Hidden Power caused 2 rings to start levitating around itself. And these rings get bigger when Drew suddenly snaps his fingers, causing Masquerade to concentrate all of the Hidden Power energy and explode the rings, resulting in sparkles all over the audience, including May, and the stadium, since May was watching from the crowd. May acknowledged that this was a beautiful attack, and stated that Drew and his Masquerade had to be in sync to be able to pull something off just by Drew snapping his fingers, and noted that Drew and his Pokemon having a bond was something that she and her Pokemon should reach for as well. Drew and Masquerade's performance then continued, as while the audience was distracted by the sparkles, Drew had his Masquerade use the bubble to fill the entire stadium with huge bubbles, and Drew then has his Masquerade follow up with a Silver Wind, spraying the bubbles across the stadium and all over the audience, amazing them even more. And they even go outside the stadium, amazing action game, including May. Because of Drew's awesome performance, he got a perfect score of 100 from all of the judges, as well as a standing ovation from the audience. Drew then bowed to the audience as Harley, watching from just outside the waiting room, since he decided to view more up close, was not impressed by the performance at all, trying to convince himself that it wasn't great at all, when in reality he was just extremely nervous, seeing how good Drew's performance was. May was also extremely nervous about the performance, noting how good it was, while Ash, Caroline, Brock, and Max were all amazed by it. Next up was Robert, who used his Milotic again. After the second place competitor went and got a good score, but Robert and his Milotic ended up getting the same score as Drew, a perfect 100, and also a standing ovation from the audience. After Robert had went, Vivian officially directed the audience's attention to the screen in the stadium, revealing the top 32 competitors. Of course, Robert and Drew easily made it through because they had perfect scores of 100, while Harley and May managed to make it into the top 32 as well. As for the other top 32 competitors, or top 28 rather, because we already knew 4 of them, they were just random-ass fucks, with random-ass designs. They're not even worth mentioning. You can see some of them in the pictures. But anyways, the gang obviously supported May, as well as Caroline supported May as well, and they reminded her to be focused and not get too excited about the fact that she'd moved on, since she'd be facing some tough opponents. Just then, Vivian then upgraded the screen to randomize all of the trainers' profiles so that they could see what the matchups for the next round would be, as it was now time for the battle rounds. The random coordinators were matched with each other, whereas May was matched with none other than Harley, much to May's shock and Harley's delight, as he could now have his revenge on May fully. As for Drew, he saw this matchup and remarked that it was going to be an intense round for the both of them. Later that night, on the Slateboard Beach, Jesse, James, and Meowth were there, as well as James and Chimecho. And James and Meowth were very tired and annoyed, as Jesse was vigorously coming up with plans to try and find some way to participate in the Grand Festival, very determined to do so, stating she would enter the contest no matter what, utilizing Plan C. Apparently, she had come up with that many plans that now she was on Plan C, even though they had only used one already, so she must have come up with something that we didn't even see, but this plan was going to involve crashing the Grand Festival. Great. Just when I wanted to just, focus on the contest, we have more fucking Team Rocket bullshit, as usual. Anyways, we'll get to that later. We then cut to the next day. After all the coordinators, as well as Vivian, all the judges, and the audience, including Ash, Caroline, Max, and Brock, had returned from the night back to the contest hall, and it was time for the first round of battle rounds to begin, and Harley versus May was the first match. Since it was a double battle, May had to send out 2 Pokemon, so she sent out Beautifly and Bulbasaur, whilst Harley sent out his 2 Pokemon that we knew of, Banette and Cacturne. May had come up with Bulbasaur joining Beautifly last minute, but she was still determined to win, and requested that she and Harley make this battle fair. No goddamn tricks from Harley as usual, but Harley's only response was that he and May had different definitions of fairness. This led May to realize that Harley was not going to play fair, and if he wasn't going to play fair, then she was going to do everything it took to beat him, and not hold back, even if that meant she had to pull out some tricks as well. Nothing to the extent of Harley, obviously, but she was going to do everything in her power to win.